Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are really happy to have Andrew Ludington with us this afternoon. He's going to be talking about the brand new book, The Splinter Effect, and or just Splinter Effect, no article.
Right.
And Andrew signed a batch of books for us right here, and I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if you'd like to purchase one of our signed copies. And if you have questions that come up during the hour, just type them in and I'll be on screen towards the end of the hour and I would be happy to ask any of your questions. Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. As I was saying to Andrew, since we both had, excuse me, Northwestern University graduates or whatever, I'm wearing the only purple thing I own. But I feel like it also relates to Justinian's Constantinople, because purple being an imperial color. So
There you go.
kind of a double.
You're dressed for royalty today.
I am. It's a kind of harmless amusement. I do these every day and all. And so one of the things I do to kind of keep myself amused is to try to sort of dress to fit whatever the book or the period goes. I have a fairly extensive wardrobe acquired from all over, so it's not that hard. But if you're a Northwestern University person, purple is part of your life.
It's very true. And I've worked for Northwestern for 28 years. So
Wow.
I have a fair amount of purple in my wardrobe.
I bet you do.
Mhm.
We have done a couple of Northwestern University travel. In fact, the first time we went to China, we went with the head of the art department, who then moved on to Pitt. And they take with them like a purple banner when you're doing Northwestern alumni trips. And at some point, they capture all of you sitting around, and kind of a thing with this big purple banner. So anyway, and they give you purple accoutrement, like a hat or whatever. But
Oh,
that's a good
sure.
way. It's
Sure.
actually a good way to keep track of people when you're traveling in a foreign country. You know,
hmm
Purple unites. But anyway, we are here to talk about Andrew's debut novel, which I read a bit late, but I absolutely loved. And we were saying right before we started that I think just at this moment, the idea of a hero and an escapist adventure, maybe going back in time to a period when things were tough somewhere else, is not a bad thing to be doing. So, Andrew, you wrote this book because those of us who know publishing recognize that it takes almost a year to get a book from, turning it into production. So, how long ago did you write it? And as a corollary, what got you interested in writing at all?
So I started writing this book uh, right around 2020. My wife and I had a trip planned for Rome. We were going to go to Rome in April of 2020 and spend 2 weeks. Great plan. As you can imagine, that plan hit a small road bump
Mm.
called COVID and was canceled. And so while I was moping around the house, bemoaning the lack of the trip, my wife said, "What do you need? What do you need right now?" And I said, I just want to go on this vacation." And then it just struck me how fun it would be to come up with a story where you could go to not only the location of your choice, in my case, I really wanted to go to Rome, but at any time you would want to. So you could go and visit and explore this really foreign environment. And so that was the germ of the idea for Splinter Effect. And from there, it built into this whole constructed world around it. Um, I have been a writer for some time. When I was in my 20s, I wrote screenplays. And I wrote and sold a few screenplays when I was younger. And for any of you out there who have ever worked in Hollywood, nothing ever gets made. That's the joke everybody says, nothing ever gets made. So they were bought and they are warming someone's shelf right now.
Yes, but what wonderful practice for you. I thought you must have some kind of a background because the pacing in this book is very good.
Oh, thank
Better
you.
than a first-time novelist. I mean, let me start that over. Better than somebody with little experience in story structure and pacing could actually do. So writing screenplays is actually a great way to learn pacing because it's not nearly as leisurely as a novel, the way the story unfolds, is it?
It really isn't. And it's very structure heavy. It was was actually quite freeing when I started working on the novel,
Mhm.
to realize, oh, I can actually describe things, which you really can't do in a screenplay. It is all
No, no,
dialogue,
you can't.
tiny amounts of description.
Yep, we do a lot of um, conversations with authors who are experienced in Hollywood. Patrick had the pleasure of doing one with John Sayles not long ago. A whole bunch of writers, and um, almost universally, they do like the fact there's no writer's room. That you're not limited to mostly dialogue with a few directions. But conversely, it's very hard for a novelist to write a screenplay because you have to like not describe everything and have interior thoughts. There, it has to be largely dialogue, right?
Right. The rule in screenwriting is if you can't see it, you don't write it. If you can't see it or if you don't hear it, you don't write it.
Got it. So I have spent a lot of time in Constantinople, today called obviously Istanbul, but also we published, Poison Pen Press published a whole series of books set in Justinian's Constantinople. So I
Oh,
learned perforce as the editor of these books, a whole, actually the whole life story of Justinian, the various incidents of his career, been to all kinds of museums to see the work, been through the city to see it all. But I have to say that despite all that, the menorah escaped me. So talk to us a bit about, well, I don't know, how do you want to talk about this? Do you want to do it chronologically from Rome, or do you want to talk about, your Indiana Jones kind of guy? What's a chronoarchaeologist? Let's start there.
all right. What's a chronoarchaeologist? So, um, it doesn't take long in the book. I think it's on the back cover that it is that Indiana Jones is certainly called to mind with the book. Um, but a chronoarchaeologist in my world is somebody who goes back in time for fixed periods of time to find, steal, and hide precious artifacts right when they drop out of human observation, so that they can be excavated in the present when you return to the present. So Rabbit Ward is a chronoarchaeologist. He's been doing it for years. He's very good at his job. He speaks 6 ancient languages and understands various cultures and can fit in, lie, and manipulate, and fight his way out of situations. Um, but he's personally a mess. Uh,
Okay. Why did you decide to make him personally a mess?
well, the biggest reason was I I love Indiana Jones. Everybody loves Indiana Jones, but Indiana Jones is very out here. You really have a pretty straightforward character who's informed largely by Harrison Ford's portrayal of him. There isn't a lot that's there in the story to let you know who he is inside. Although Harrison Ford's a fantastic actor, so he brought a lot to that. I really wanted to make an action hero who was sometimes afraid, who was sometimes resentful, who, in Rabbit's case, bites the hand that feeds him all the time, and does some dumb things, especially in the present. He's also a little entitled because he's been so good at his job for so long that when it starts to go badly, right when the book starts, he's a bit of a loss because he has been celebrated his whole career and suddenly finds himself scrambling. So
Got it.
to me, that was interesting to have somebody who was a a person with some pretty challenging interior life, but who can nonetheless go out and get the adventure done.
So, what organization does he work for to give him some legitimacy in this whole thing?
The Smithsonian, of course.
Of course, right,
Of course.
exactly.
Works for
Yeah.
the Smithsonian.
Well, I mean, it reminds me of my friend James Rollins, who his entire Sigma Force crew, operates subterraneally under the castle, the Smithsonian Castle. And
Hmm.
I've always kind of liked that. But I did think the Smithsonian or the British Museum, but if he's American, he probably has to be the Smithsonian, rather than you're making up some organization. Military thrillers are always, they all have their kind of like black ops team And I thought it was great that you used the Smithsonian. Are there any legal issues attached to that? Does the Smithsonian actually care if you decide to take one of its employees and send him back to 535 Constantinople?
Apparently not,
Apparently
which
not.
is
Okay.
very good to hear.
Well, it is good to hear. I mean, you can't really defame a public figure or a public entity, but at the same time, sometimes, as long as you don't actually use photographs or portray them, I think you're okay. We'll
Yeah.
see. So he works for the Smithsonian, but in his past life, or before we get to this adventure, Rabbit had something truly derailing. So speaking of Rome, what happened to him?
Right. So uh, at the time, it's many years prior to the start of the book, but he was already an established professional in his area. He was asked to take on a young mentee as his partner. Way too young, very inexperienced young man named Aaron. And he takes him back on a mission to Rome in the 5th century to go get the menorah. And in the process of trying to get the menorah, not only do they not get the menorah, but Aaron dies. And so Rabbit is saddled with this, the death of his young partner when the book begins. So one of the things that uh, as the book is starting, he has been robbed twice. So a criminal organization has robbed his last 2 finds, and it has seriously damaged his reputation. So at the origin of the book, Rabbit is clued into the fact that the menorah may have turned up again in 6th century Constantinople. And so he agrees to go try to reclaim the menorah from Constantinople, which would in some way not only help his career be redeemed, but offer some kind of personal redemption for him too.
Well, okay, so two things to unpack. First of all, and I meant to ask you this earlier, when he is able to go back in time as a chrono archaeologist, I love this. This is so Dan Brown coming up with. Right. Is there a fixed period of time? In other words, is there a time limit to how long he can spend in the past?
Yes, so the outside limit is 20 days. You can have shorter missions, but you can't have a mission longer than 20 days.
Why
And
not?
that's really arbitrary. I hate to
Oh,
admit it, but that's quite arbitrary.
okay. I thought maybe the technology involved.
It is the technology involved,
Okay.
but because the technology does not actually exist, I do
Right.
have to make up my own rules. So
Yep.
it is based on the technology of the time machines that they use in present day of the book. And if you don't return to the same spot that you left when your time concludes, then you don't go back. So not only does he need to find the object and hide it, but he has to get back to the exact roughly meter square area that he entered that time through, or he gets left in the past.
That's so interesting. I have read like three time travel things. I'm trying desperately to remember the other one where somebody gets stuck in Victorian because they can't get back to the exact same spot. So I think it's interesting that that seems to be a thread in time travel, is that the only way you can go to the past and return to the past, you have to be physically in the same spot, so it makes it feel there's a physical element to it. In other words, you can't just like lie down in bed and decide, hey, I'm going to Rome. Um, why do you think that is? I mean, that's an interesting construct.
I I mean, it certainly adds an element of tension to the plot, but it is also, I think, for me, I really wanted to ground the idea of time travel because, of course, that's such an outlandish notion. Not that it's original; people have been thinking about it forever,
Mhm.
but such an outlandish notion. I didn't want readers to have to accept a lot on top of that. So I really wanted people to have, I love this phrase, one by sci-fi. JT.
Hello.
And so for me, that was the one by, was the time travel itself. So I tried to build a whole structure around it that would feel recognizable and grounded and relatable in our present day.
Got it. Hey, JT, thank you so much for
Hello.
joining us.
Hello.
We
How
were,
are you?
Great.
he's
Good
great.
to see you. Both of you.
Well,
Hello.
thank you. I'm wearing Northwestern purple. I just want points for this.
I've got a little Tennessee smoky gray going.
Okay, there we go. So we
Yeah.
were
We're in
just
that area too.
discussing kind of the mechanics of time travel, the fact that there is a time limit and a physical thing. But the other thing I was about to ask him as you come in was if you send somebody back in time, can he really die back in time and then not be dead in the present?
Hmm. So I can answer that.
Oh, good.
In my world,
I
in
could
my
tell
world,
you, but then I would have to kill you.
Right.
and you'd never go back to the future that you came from. No, yes, he could absolutely die in the past.
But then what would happen to him in the present? Would he just mysteriously be erased?
I mean, effectively, he has left his space in the time continuum and gone back for that period of time. So it's not as though his body's hanging out waiting for him in the present. So he would just not return.
Okay, so it'd be sort of a mysterious missing person thing forever. Sorry, JT, step in.
I mean, would he just not exist? He just wouldn't exist if he died.
Right.
The people around him, it would just be erased from their cognizance, right?
No, no, and in fact, Rabbit actually talks about a colleague of his. It's just in a casual conversation, talks about a colleague of his who went on a mission, went back in time, and ended up getting sepsis and died in the past. So he never returned, but Rabbit's aware he never returned.
Isn't it
Mhm.
great that you can make up your own rules when you do this kind of thing? So, I mean, basically, it becomes a missing person case that can't be solved. Is what you're saying. You know, when the young man dies back there. So we were going back to what happened to get Rabbit disgraced and losing the menorah. So the menorah in Rome makes perfectly good sense, I think. Was it taken from Jerusalem when the Romans more or less sacked Jerusalem? Was that how it got to Rome?
Yep, that's right. So when Titus sacked Jerusalem in the first century AD, his army destroyed the temple and took all of the spoils from Jerusalem back to Rome as spoils of war. The menorah was I mean, we think about sort of tabletop menorahs. This was a almost human-sized menorah, a huge gold, heavy object that was displayed in a temple, effectively a museum, that was displaying spoils of war from different Roman conquests. And it was there for hundreds of years until the Vandals. And the last written note we have about it was from a tourist, I think a Greek tourist, but I may not be correct about that, who visited Rome and described having seen the menorah in his notes, which are still around today. So then the Vandals shortly thereafter sacked Rome and looted the city and took lots and lots of spoils of war to Carthage. Now we don't know. We don't know whether the menorah went with them, but it might have. We don't know whether it was melted down for coins. We don't know whether it was displayed in Carthage, but there are so many theories about what happened to it after that because General Belisarius from Rome goes to Carthage, defeats the Vandals in Carthage, and takes all those spoils back to Constantinople. So that's the thread that I pick up is that there's a rumor that it might have been rediscovered in Constantinople. By the way, there's another rumor that says it was deemed so unlucky that it gets sent back to Jerusalem and was perhaps stowed away in a church in Jerusalem after that. So it has all this great, rich, possible history.
Wow, JT, does this make you want to write something like this? I mean, you're
Oh my gosh.
stuck in the present.
Well, I am, but I did just do a time travel in the Joss Walker books. So, and maybe Andrew's ideas helped with a little bit of that. But when I read this, look, I've got my beautiful copy right here. Oh, um, I absolutely fell in love with this whole idea of these lost artifacts that who knows where they are, right? They lose time at some point. And I just thought that was brilliant the way that you went back and found the things and created a whole new world for them. It's very
Thank
cool.
you.
I like it.
I
I
think
approve this message.
I think it's a really interesting idea that somebody would go back and find something and then, put it in such a place that he could find it later. That was, I thought, a brilliant idea.
Yeah, 2000 years later, you come back from your time travel and you're like, haha, we need to go dig this up and do it fast because there's your ticking clock, right? That somebody else also knows where it is and now it's a race to get it. It's just, it's Indiana Jones meets time travel. It's brilliant.
And has infinite possibilities for sequels.
So many.
So many. Plus, if you are a screenwriter manqué, so to speak, this is a book that might very well become a screenplay. Who knows?
Who knows?
I know.
That's a great time to pitch the fact that book 2 in the series comes out March 17th, 2026.
Yay. I know. And I will be back from time traveling on the Orient Express by then. Yay. I'm really excited about. Only my Orient Express is going from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur and back because we're going to end up in Singapore after a long cruise. By miracle, the train leaves the day the cruise gets there. I know. I could hardly believe it when I looked up the dates.
Oh, you're kidding.
I thought I'd meet resistance from my husband. And when I revealed this fact to him, but he was like, well, why not? But I mention it because I think many of us think of the Orient Express and Istanbul or Constantinople kind of, in one
Together.
breath because, we've been raised on Agatha Christie and other kind of adventure things. So have either of you actually been there?
I haven't.
Not.
That
was going to be our next trip.
Times. I love it. It's one of my very favorite cities. And it's, San Francisco gets so much of its glamour and so much of its, what do I want to call it? Aura from being a bay city, where you go on the water and you cross and all. And Istanbul is even more like that. I mean, you're crossing from Europe to Asia. You are crossing up to the Black Sea. You are crossing down the Dardanelles, to the Adriatic. You can go up the Golden Horn, which can be blocked off by and has been. It's like Venice in a sense that you travel by ferry. You can actually travel all these areas they have a great ferry system, which is sort of like passenger trains, which is true, I think, of a lot of maritime cities, isn't it? Where they figured out that ferries work.
Mm-hmm.
Better. Well, like Venice, the Vaporetto is so much easier to get around. You just hop on and then you get off and there you are.
Well, Seattle with the islands, there's a whole system there. Even San Francisco, I know. I'm trying to remember what the name of the writer was. He wrote his first book because he commuted by ferry from wherever he was up in Marin, down at the top of the bay.
I've been on that ferry. Catherine, they took us to a baseball game and we went on that ferry. And wow, that's a great one. And it's beautiful at night because all of the bridges and the lights. Man, I need to write that into a book.
Yeah.
I do like the ferry and through the Puget Sound to the island.
No, there's just something magical about, cities on the water where you can do these kinds of commutes. But for me, Istanbul is still like the premier one for that. And there's some islands scattered where people have summer villas and all kinds of, it's actually quite decadent 19th century, the heyday of the sort of decline of the Ottoman Empire. But so there's so many layers to the city, there's the ancient ones and then there's the, Ottoman ones and whatever. I wish that what was going on at the moment didn't make it kind of unappealing to travel there, but that's sort of
Not
true
the
all
safest
over at the moment.
spot in the world right now.
But if if you were going to pick another city, Andrew, what would you, or another place, what would you, well, you already know because you've already done your second book. Why am I asking you that? Where is it you would be
I'm going to
going?
look into the
Second place?
future and see what it will be. Yeah, so Double Shadow takes place primarily in Jerusalem, um, both modern day and first century.
Wow.
Wonderful.
So
Have you been?
I have been to Jerusalem.
Okay.
Yeah.
On my bucket list. Another one on my bucket list.
Right. Another one probably not great at the moment, but in the future. I know. Right. So what else do we want to talk about? We've covered the background and why rabbit? Why rabbit? That's a great name. I meant to ask you that. It's a terrific name.
I knew I wanted to have a name. I knew I wanted to have a memorable name. I knew I wanted to have a name that you wouldn't mistake for any other character. And I thought about it for a long time, and I ended up going for a walk through my local cemetery and was just reading names on gravestones. And I came upon a gravestone for Rabbit O'Leary.
Oh
I
my
thought,
gosh.
Rabbit, that's a great first name. So it has that sense of being always on the run, of being crafty, of hopping through time. I just loved the name. It has actually been remarkably divisive.
Really?
Some people love it. Some people, there was one reviewer who said, I couldn't finish this book because of how unrealistic the name Rabbit is. I thought, huh, that's an odd criteria.
Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, actually, I think names have more freight than maybe sometimes we recognize. We've had some interesting discussions at the store over the years about how to pick names and,
Mm.
how people react to names. And I'll bet each one of us knows at least one, I mean, has at least one name where some person we know has colored us so that we don't, I'm not going to reveal mine, but I have one definite name that works that way. But
Oh yeah.
rabbit seems kind of, like inoffensive.
I mean, I can almost guarantee the readers won't have been bullied by somebody named Rabbit in their playground when they were a kid, which often can color your view, right?
So if thrillers rise and fall to a large extent on the villain, we have talked about Rabbit, and we've talked about the treasure, but we haven't talked about who the opposition in this up.
So the opposition for it's a little tricky to get into that, but he is right from the beginning. He has been, as I mentioned, he's been robbed twice. So there is a another chronoarchaeologist, but who is non-licensed. She works for a criminal organization, and she has stolen from him twice. And she also ends up in Constantinople, competing for the menorah. We don't know why precisely the menorah. We don't know why precisely she is after him. I promise it will be revealed. Um, but yes, she is every bit as good at her job as he is at his. She is facile. She is incredibly wily. She's tough. She's tenacious. She has a much better sense of humor than Rabbit, um, and makes fun of him a lot. So for me, she's a great foil.
Wow, JT, I can certainly see why you like this book. This is a woman after your own heart, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the absolute romance of the idea of going after these artifacts and the two really top-notch people going at it against each other and will they, won't they, all of that push and pull. It's great. It gives it a lot of texture, shall we say, as we get further into the story. I know we don't want to spoil anything. We
Right.
don't spoil anything. There's a lot that goes on there in that situation.
I
But
really like
she's
the
a great
idea.
character.
Hmm?
She's a great character.
She is a great character. I really like the idea that the bad person is a woman, because too often books like this is one guy versus another. or a group of another. So I think it's kind of interesting that you've got, the male-female dynamic here. I can't ask you without spoilers that she's going to be a continuing character, so we will pass over that. So JT, how did this book come your way? Do you think it was because of the Joss Walker books?
It was not. Andy's editor is Michael Homler, who did the Killer Year anthology with us back in 2008 when we were doing Killer Year.
Ah,
So I met Michael back then, and he and I have stayed friends ever since. And he sends me books every once in a while. I send him authors every once in a while. We've got a nice symbiotic relationship. And he wrote me out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in probably a year or so. And he wrote me, he goes, I've got a book and I think you're going to love it. And I'm like, all right, send it. I trust him. And sure enough, I mean, I read the first chapter and I was like, I wrote him back and I'm like, dude, what is this? He goes, I know, I know. And so I read it and just fell madly in love. And then Andy and I got to talk at BoucherCon, and I got to drag him around and introduce him to a few people and say, hey, we got a debut author, a real one, a real live wire. This one's going to be a big hit. I just thought it was great. I thought it was really unique in the world that we're living in with all of the books. Everything feels the same, and this does not. It feels very fresh and new.
I'm lucky I picked it up, because I have like what 200 books sitting on my shelf for
Yeah.
each month. And there is another editor at your publisher who makes it his job to send me his books with his card attached. So sort of like, pay attention, Barbara, this is mine. But yours just came in. And so, I was coming to the end of my March shelves, and there it was. And I had a moment and I picked it up. But my heart stops when I think I could have missed it.
I would have let you know.
Oh, good. I'm
I
really
would have
glad
told
to
you. I
hear
mean,
that.
because even just look at the cover. Because
No, it's a great cover.
I read a
They did a
galley
great
that,
job.
I didn't see the cover until it showed up. And I'm like, dang, that's, you got great branding, you've got the whole thing going on. I'm a fan. I'm a
It's
big
got
fan.
an Indiana Jones kind of a hat lurking in the background there. Great
Yeah.
colors. No,
Yeah.
I really like it. So talk to us for a moment about Josh Walker, because are you winding that up? Tell us
I
about who
am.
she is. We carry the Josh Walker. I can't talk. Josh.
What
Hell.
did Joss
We carry JG's books, and she's doing it as an independently published series, and so she kindly signs them and sends them to us, and we need to catch up. But I loved it when I first met her in her first book. She was an employee at what, Vanderbilt University, wasn't she?
Huh?
Yep,
Yep.
librarian, a librarian heroine in Vanderbilt University starting out on a thriller. So how's she doing?
How is Jane doing? So Jane Thorne, CIA librarian. Jane
Oh,
is
you write him as Josh Walker. I'm sorry.
I write him as Joss Walker.
That's
Right.
it. But
The pen
Jane,
name is Joss Walker.
that's
Jane
right.
Thorne.
Sorry.
Yeah, Jane is the
Right.
character.
Overload
But
here. Sorry.
now it's,
Okay.
I mean, my gosh, Barbara, how many books?
A
How
lot.
many books
But
have
I
you
should
read
still
today?
read. But you should still know that. I should still
Um,
know that. Anyway,
yeah.
all right. So Jane Thorne, librarian. Time for
Jane
the
Thorne,
late
CIA
librarian.
librarian. So book 6 is coming out May 20th, and I actually just finished and just uploaded the manuscript, and I'm about to place my order and send you some books.
Oh, wonderful.
Um, it is, oh my gosh, I'm not ready to end the series. It's the 6th book in the series. It's always been a 6-book series. It's had a 6-book arc from the very beginning. And everything that happened in the 5th book was setting up for how we were going to have this huge time travel, because every book is a different uh, earth, air, fire, water, ether time. So this one is the time book. And as Andrew probably can very much attest, time is a very difficult thing to do, because it is so easy to just fix something and then break something else. You fix this, you break that. It's really, there's a lot that goes on there. And I can't wait for you to read it, Barbara, because it is really complicated. It's the most complicated of all of them, but it is the end of the series. And I've reread that ending like 18 times now, and every time I cry. and
Oh,
just the idea of it. I've some of the beta readers have come back and they're crying. Everybody's crying. It's a really, it's sad to end something that I've never ended a series before. Never. It's the
mm.
first time I've ever actually, put a period on something. So it's been really challenging, but it's a time travel book. And I was writing it when I was reading this, and thank you for some of the ideas.
Well, the good news is that JT will be coming to see us, which we're going to discuss off screen here at the end of this conversation, in either very late July or early August. And we can then talk about both series when, yes, I know. Is this your new, you know,
It came, I got it today. Look at
Nice
that.
very
timing.
exciting.
How about that for timing?
Her publisher seems to be completely entranced with this particular shade of pink.
Pink.
So I think of JT now as the pink author, right? Anyway, we will sort that out. But I think, guys, time travel allows so many different versions. I mean, you're making it up, right? It's scary to think that maybe one day one of them might actually work.
I gotta say, if any version is gonna work, it's yours. Not mine, because mine's magic, right? So mine's a magical creation of it's physics, but it's still magic. But
Mhm.
yours actually is so based in the science of physics and how it could work, how time travel and all of that. Have you already talked about how you do your time travel,
Hmm.
the
Wait,
science
wait,
behind it?
let's do
Good.
it.
So the my basic tenet for time travel is, well, it's the Splinter effect. Um, and by the way, this will get more complex as continuing books go on, but you only have to buy one thing per book. Um, so the basic tenet is, and this it's people frequently get lost in some of the details, but you go back in time, you can do whatever you want. You could as somebody says, you could kill Hitler. But if you did, before he was supposed to die, then you would create a splinter. You would create an alternate universe in which that could have happened. And if you were to stay in that timeline, then that's your new history. But if you go back to the history you left. So you didn't alter that history. The whole idea is that you have always been in your history, because that already happened. It's in the past. So if I travel back to 500 BC, well, I was there in 500 BC. Um, and as long as I don't change anything that historically we know happened, um, then you're not going to alter history and create a splinter. So that's my basic tenet for you can't go back and keep trying over and over again. And you can mess up. So if Rabbit changes something that is was truly part of his history, then everything he does after that point isn't in his history. He can hide the object, but if he hides the object, it's not hidden there because that's now in a splinter. It's in an alternate universe.
That is really interesting because one of the big tenets of time travel is you're not allowed to alter history at all. It's like the butterfly wing thing. So I love your idea. I see why you like it, JT. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
it's a clever way to do it, and the possibilities are infinite. You get the quantum theory in there, and it's like, okay, we really can splinter. We can split this off, and then I mean, you can do anything you want. You have so much freedom. The problem with the series, and you'll hit this, I promise you, because it's just a thing known to writers when you're writing a series. The first book, you're setting up the rules of the series, right? The second book, the team has been put together and they're working on something. The third book, you realize all the ways you screwed up in the first book setting up the world and why it doesn't actually work the way you think it's going to work. So the third book's where you have to start making the changes for the fourth book, which is a complete reversal of what the first book was established as.
So
FYI.
so funny you should say that because I'm about three-quarters of the way through the third book. And And your rules not only apply to a book series, for me at least, they apply to individual books. I I hit this point right about 3/4 of the way through every book where I realize, made a mess of things and I can't go on until I fix it. And so I go back and I restructure and plot out my outline based on what I have just written, figure out all the things I did badly, make my tweaks, make my corrections, and then I can go on and write the last act. But I cannot go on and write the last act until I've figured out that 3/4 mess that I've made. And that's where I am right now in book 3, which is also, of course, 3/4 of the way through the series because it's going to be a 4-book series. So this is the double whammy of 3/4 problem.
Why do you say it's going to be a 4-book series? How did you determine that?
I know how I want the arc of Rabbit's story to run. I knew that from the beginning. I didn't know at the beginning whether it was going to be a 4 or maybe a 5-book series. But I knew it was going to be a fixed series with an end. And as I started to plot it all out, I realized, oh, what I'm really doing here is the first book is Act 1, the second book is the first half of Act 2, third and so on. So it's 4 books. And I could feel that was the way I was going to put this together.
That's so interesting. When Jim Rollins was here in February to kick off, he has written 3 of his 4-book science fiction series. And we had a big discussion at the store in the event about what do we call it? Is it a tetralogy? Is it, a it's a quartet? It is sort of fun because you can have a trio or a trilogy and you can have a quintet, but which term applies? We came down on tetralogy. Because quartet sounded just too musical, but it's fairly rare is the reason I mentioned it. Most of the time it's 3 books or 5. It seems like an odd number seems to work better in story structure. So 4 books is, I'm trying to remember, the Alexandria Quartet is the one I always think of, the Lawrence Durrell. Right. I'm trying to remember, what other quartets can we think of besides Jim Rollins?
Book ones?
Yeah, Moonfall is his quartet.
Oh, my dad's
The
reading
world's
them right
called
now.
the Alexandria Quartet, which I remember reading in college.
Oh my gosh, who else?
But there's not many. There are trilogies all over the place.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's tons of trilogies.
I actually,
Oh, well, I mean, no, I guess they did that with the movie. Twilight and Hunger Games, they split out to be 4 out of 3 stories. But those were the
there's a new Hunger Games, so now we're in a
I
quintet.
got it yesterday. I can't wait to read it. Apparently, it outsold the last book. Yeah, it was 1 million copies first week, and the last one was 600 first week.
Yeah.
Because nobody wanted a story about President Snow. Nobody wanted the origin story of the poor little boy, right? He was so evil. I think that's actually really, really interesting. The idea of a villain origin story. We all want it, but that one, he is so incredibly evil that nobody wanted to see. They wanted to see him evil as a child instead of a sympathetic character, and it didn't work. Versus this one is Haymitch's story, and everybody's like, "Yay, we love Haymitch. We want to see him kill people. That'll be awesome." It's really interesting.
Right. Oh, alternate realities, as I have said before in this conversation, are really appealing at the moment. We've been so surprised that business has taken like a 30% jump in February and March. Yeah, and people have been flocking into the store in numbers that we haven't seen since before COVID.
Awesome.
And I think that, well, for one thing, the price of other forms of entertainment and escape have gone up dramatically. And even though I think $32 for a book is a lot, it's still, 2 people can't go to the movies really anymore and have popcorn for anything like that. And at least a book, when you've read it, you still have it. You can reread it. You can give it to somebody. You can do various things. So I think that might be part of it. But I also think that the appeal of, I wonder what people read in the 30s. which time period I feel that we have dropped into. I wonder what people were reading back in the 1930s, where that was the golden age of crime fiction.
Yeah,
So
that's when all the
Agatha
Bolton
Christie
novels,
Right.
comfort
right?
reading, you think? You know, Marjorie Allingham Sayers, were those all basically comfort reading back in the day?
I think there was a lot of crime fiction reading at the time, and film was almost all comedy.
Yeah, and or dancing, you know,
Hmm.
say, well, it's Fred Astaire and Ginger and
Hmm.
you know, musicals. I mean, you know, I can remember when I was a child in the, you know, the 40s and 50s that we went to musicals with, you know, huge excitement all the time. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I probably saw it 9 times, you know, as the dancing was amazing. Um, yeah, so I think maybe, you know, when real times are difficult, that escaping, you know, into fantasy literature, whatever, musicals, is a very comforting kind of a thing to do.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful book. I don't know if you've read it called You Gotta Be the Book.
No.
It's a book about it's the education of reading. Um, and this teacher who wrote the book, his whole idea is there is a level of mastery of reading wherein you stop seeing the words and it's now it's entered your brain and you are in the book. You are seeing the characters, you're seeing the description, right? I think most readers probably experience this, but some people don't. For some people, they see words on a page and they translate them sort of roughly into a story. And I think that there is something that is just so absorbing about that, really falling into a book and just getting lost in it, that even a wonderful film has a hard time replicating.
That's such an interesting point. I can remember Gone with the Wind. I read it in one sitting, although it was a really long sitting, you know, and I'm forever. But I can remember being absolutely lost in that book, you know, and I think a lot of people feel that way about Tolkien, you know, the Lord of the Rings, that people
Mhm.
just, you know, like dropped into it. I thought The Once and Future King was a book like that. I absolutely love that whole you know, different version of. So it's not you don't do it, I think, with every book. I think, you know, as a reader, there's some books. I don't know, JT, do you do that every book?
No.
No,
Oh gosh, I wish I'm actually on I just finished Onyx Storm. You know what a huge Rebecca Yarros
I do know what a huge
dragon fan
Charles
I
fan
am.
you are. Yep.
It's not
And
very
I'm
popular, so most people haven't read it, but
no, I know it's a little known
it's
book, you
obscure.
know, very
Right.
obscure. And I've been in such a slump, I've actually gone back and reread the last 100 pages of that like 3 times.
Yeah.
Because I can just slip into that world and it's so evocative and I can see it. And I'm having a hard time finding anything. Crime fiction feels pale in comparison to that right now because our world is so wacky.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Every day you open up the news sites and the social media and it's like, okay, I'm going to go back to this now. And I can't really get into anything. So I've switched over to nonfiction and I'm reading a book about trees because it's just like I just need something so completely different.
I
Um,
love historical fiction. That's where I tend to drop back. You know, it sort of reminds me that people have survived difficult times
yeah,
before. And, you know, maybe there's some, and actually, Andrew, your book, you know, your book certainly speaks to that.
it
You know,
really
I mean,
does.
it's true that the Vandals sacked Rome and, you know, that was terrible. And then it all moved to Constantinople and Justinian did amazing things. I don't think that he gets nearly enough press and nearly enough credit for the truly extraordinary ruler that he was.
Oh, I mean, as a builder, he was one of the top.
Yeah, but
Herod,
as a lawgiver, I mean, he, you know, the Justinian Code. I mean,
right?
it was just extraordinary what
Mhm.
he accomplished in all of that. Wow. Yep.
I'm trying
So
to think of what his chief legal advisor's name was now. It's escaping me. But there's a, a, a frieze, I guess, not really a bust, but a
yeah.
frieze of him in the Supreme Court. The person who really
Yeah.
wrote
Oh, okay.
Justinian's code.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
come to me in a moment. You know, I'm going to Ravenna when I go to Italy in September because I'm so in love with Byzantine mosaics, which was, you know, their great art form. And I've been to Venice, been to Torcello, been all over Istanbul and all, but I've missed Ravenna. So I'm dragging my husband a whole day out of the way just so we can go and spend, the day in Ravenna and look at the mosaics. And I mean, you know, it's truly remarkable. I'm so glad that you chose to write about Justinian and Constantinople, or trying to remember, Byzantium is in his day. It was the Byzantine Empire, the
Mhm.
second Roman Empire, or the Roman Empire of the East. So I'm hoping more people will write about it. It's a culture that we should know more about. Right. So, Patrick, do you want to pop in and see if we have any questions from the audience? People will be thrilled to see JT, an unexpected bonus here.
Patrick,
Hey, JT, how are you?
good to see ya.
You too. You too. Let's see. Okay. A bunch of comments. Stefania, our friend, you've already talked about this, but she says, why did you choose the ancient Rome in particular?
Stefani lives in, Stefani is Italian. She stays up way too late to watch all these things.
You
Ah,
missed the very
Oh,
beginning.
Buonasera.
right.
and thank you for staying up late to watch this. Um, I've always been fascinated with the Roman Empire. And probably had I had my druthers, I would have said it earlier in the Roman Empire in Italy. But the menorah just caught me, and I had to follow it. So it ended up taking me further into the later Roman Empire, which I knew far less about, and there are far fewer primary sources. But it was fascinating, and I learned a tremendous amount in doing the research for the book. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's so many. I grew up watching sword and sandal movies, and I think I've read the Colleen McCullough Masters of Rome series 3 times. Lindsay Davis's novels,
Falco.
the
Marcus
Falco
Didius
books.
Falco.
Yes, they're wonderful. So there's I Claudius. There's so many good examples of the period that I romanticize it a little bit as a person, but as a writer, I try not to.
There's actually a lot of British, aren't there, Barbara? British historical novelists writing, like Ben Kane and Con Iggulden, and a lot of
Well,
people writing
they're
about Rome.
interested in Roman military history, and unfortunately, I can't remember the author, but on my night table is a new book, talk about nonfiction, which is basically, I don't remember the exact title, but it's Roman roads, and she's traveling through France and through Spain and all over. She has an overlay map of these were the major Roman roads. But the fact that, I love the idea that they're even bringing Roman aqueducts back into play for water supply. So we're heading to Rome and France in May, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But just think about the imprint that they left, their engineering, their culture, their, you know, laws, but amazingly, the roads,
Mhm.
you can still find them.
There's this great map that was a stone etched map that lays out all of the roads in the Roman Empire. I think it was probably second century or something that was made. But it's this long, skinny map, and they've just flattened the entire empire and laid out all of these lines for the roads that bear no resemblance to their actual geography.
Yeah, her book is truly
Yeah.
fascinating. I agree with you. Nonfiction is a great place to be at the moment. And again, it's a reminder that no matter all the awful things that have happened, that there are still elements of Rome with us today, still shaping what we do. Some things can be even repurposed. So
Plus ça change, plus ça même chose.
absolutely. Was that Proust?
Yes, I think so.
I think it's Proust, right? Tout ça change, tout la même chose. Right. All right, Patrick.
What does that translate to?
The more things change, the more things remain the same.
Ah, right. Okay, yeah, here's a question for both of you guys, Andy and JT. Uh, would you like to go back in time? And if so, when and why? Are there any eras that you'd love to go back to visit? If you were Marty McFly?
So
if
we
I was going to
always
go
have
back,
to assume that we would be of the upper class and, we're not going to go back as some, like prostitute or,
is this just, well, we should set the stage here though. Is this just
yeah.
as a visit? Is this like a
Good
week-long
point.
vacation or going back to live?
Good
Because these are
point.
two
Yeah.
separate things.
It may be
Yes.
different for you than me,
Mhm.
right? I think the female experience might be slightly different than the
A
male.
little bit, a little bit. But if I was gonna go back, as much as I'd be fascinated in going back to first century Rome, I mean, there's a reason I picked this as my topic area. Um, it's a really dangerous time to be in Rome. There were so many civil wars, one after another. But there was a period in the early middle Roman Empire that is referred to as the Pax Romana, which was a period of time when Rome was very safe, very low crime rate. There were no civil wars. And there were plenty of issues on the periphery of the empire, but not so much on the interior. I'd probably go there so I could see the Roman Empire without probably dying.
What's the average life expectancy? Like 30?
Surprisingly longer than you'd think. Um,
But
yeah, yeah. Many Roman patricians would live to their 70s, some into
really?
their 80s. Democritus, who was a Greek natural philosopher from 400 BC, lived to be maybe 90. Um, so there, and the other curious thing is they've done lots of research on the sewers in Rome, from various periods in history, and they had an extremely balanced diet. Even the very poor ate a diet high in vegetables and unrefined grain.
Mediterranean
They were
diet.
still able
Mhm.
to do some farming and then, I mean, they were still,
Mhm.
even though they were urban in a way, they were also agricultural still. Plus they had
Yep.
those great roads to move stuff. Where would you go, JT?
Okay, so this is going to sound really weird, but I think the first historical novel I ever read was Gene Owell's Clan of the Cave Bear.
All right.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really interesting moment in time, right? Because everything is shifting. We're starting into a completely new epic, right? We're the hunter-gatherers. We haven't hit the rational spot yet, though, I maybe would have enjoyed sitting at the feet of Plato because I kind of dig Plato. That might have been kind of fun. But yeah, I think that would be also so unpolluted and so simple and it is very much a you have to eat what you hunt, which we kind of do now as authors. That's we eat what we hunt and kill. That's how we survive if you're a full-time author like I am. So there's a nice, parallel to that. But I just love the idea of, something unspoiled, the land unspoiled and people unspoiled and just saber-toothed tigers, which I've always been absolutely fascinated by. I would love to see a mammoth like actually walking around. I think that'd be super cool.
Be kind of a Ringo Starr, Barbara Bach. Remember
Yeah,
that?
right.
It's a
What
blast
was
from the
Take me to
past.
Planet of the Apes. We'll be all good.
what was that? What was that film? God, that was so
Oh,
funny.
I know exactly what you're talking about,
yeah,
but I don't.
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh.
What about you?
Me?
Yeah.
I'd go back to 2014 and no, I'm just kidding. I I don't know. I mean, it's a toughie. It's a real tough one to if I was going to be dropped in permanently versus going back and having a look around. Those, you're right, those are different questions.
Very different questions.
Yeah.
Very different if you're a woman versus a guy too. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was,
There are
Mhm.
tons of places I would love to go, but just the subjugation would not really sit well with me. I can't
the
imagine.
subjugation, but the health risks,
Yeah,
for
that too.
women. I mean, there were plenty of men that had three or four wives, it was
Yeah,
it was hard to be female before modern medicine.
yeah, for
What
sure.
about you, Barbara? Do you have any, if you wanted to go back and have a look around, where would
I
you go?
don't know. No, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about all the reasons that I can do so well, cataract surgery and, retractable lenses and all the sort of health things and how helpless I was nearsighted at the age of 9. So, it would have been very difficult for me to have experienced the world with terrible eyesight. that, I mean, there are just so many things that we take for granted now, that I don't know. I mean, what kind of world would it be if I couldn't see?
You have to
Yeah.
get LASIK before you go.
Yeah. Well, if it were time travel, that's true. I
Yeah.
could do
Yeah.
it that way. But I sort of thought, yeah, all right. So again, it comes down to a visit or permanent, and can you come back?
So if you're visiting, where would you go?
I'd probably go to Regency, England, just because
Yeah.
I've always been so fascinated with um there were so many things happening in that time. Though I did a summer at Oxford. I didn't get to be a Rhodes Scholar because girls were not Rhodes Scholars back in the 1950s. Um, and and one of the courses I took from my tutor, Mr. Pitt, who lived in the 12th century Abbott's buildings, and so we had classes in the 12th century Abbott's buildings, was why England didn't have a revolution when France was having one. And of course, part of the answer is they earlier had one and it didn't go well. And they learned some things. But, you know, the Regency was a time post the French Revolution, but before Victorian, when it was a whole society in transition. And while it looks glamorous on the surface, if you read, like Georgette Hare or, lots of Regency novelists, it was worse for the veterans of that war than people coming back from Vietnam. There were corn riots, there were famines. The summer of 1816 was when the volcano went off, in Indonesia, and there was no summer and people starved, and I think the contrast maybe between all of those, among all those things, really would be interesting to observe.
right.
But I don't know that I would want to live there. I think I'd rather go as a visitor.
But all the elegance too.
And the
I mean,
buildings.
the buildings and the elegance and all of that. It's
Yeah.
funny, we've all chosen actually moments in time where shifts are getting ready to happen.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It'd be kind of interesting to go back and just see what the ancient Egyptians were
I
like,
was going to say that would
you
be my
know,
alternate, would be to go back to
or to
the
one of the great Mayan kingdoms and see what that was like.
If we would be sacrificed in a
Would be
heartbeat.
sacrificed instantly.
We wouldn't make it up I mean, they'd be like, oh, look, come to
Exactly.
me.
uh, I think ancient
The
Egypt was
work kind of trip.
actually would really be an interesting time. I mean, they were surprisingly healthy. You come back to what Andrew was saying, they had a great diet. The Nile, the whole Nile River Valley was the breadbasket of Rome. They were good on medicine. They traveled a lot. They didn't seem to treat their underclasses as terribly as other societies. So,
Well,
um,
they really bring to mind the breadth of human cultural uh, time. I mean, that when the Romans first came to Egypt, the Kingdom of Egypt had been around longer than the distance from Rome to us
that's right.
by a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is it's hard to get your head around.
There's a new book I just read, talk about nonfiction again, I think it's called The Mesopotamian Riddle. The Mesopotamian something. But anyway, it's about cracking cuneiform and discovering the Euphrates Valley and that civilization, and looking at the history of the Persian Empire and trying to figure out. And it was a bit later than the hieroglyphs, than Champollion figuring out the Rosetta Stone. And really, the span of time that he's talking about, we think about Egypt, but I bet very few of us know much about Babylon or, and it's a parallel. I mean, it's going on right over here while Egypt is going on over there. If it weren't for Egyptian funerary practices, we wouldn't know nearly as much about Egypt. And then because unfortunately this other civilization was largely built on mud, and it didn't hold up, so it's harder to appreciate it. We'll see. We don't even know that much about China, which I think is even older than Egypt, if I remember right. 5,000 BC, if I recall. Think of all the things we got from China: paper, gunpowder, so many astonishing things. But it's not history that we know as well in the West. Anyway, I'm droning on. Patrick, anything else?
Are On your trip, are you going to be going anywhere close to Florence?
In May, I'm going to Florence for a week.
Going to Florence. Okay.
Yeah, with
Well,
Ross King.
Stefania says she's just about 100 kilometers
All
away.
right.
So
Well,
maybe
Stefania, I'm going to be going with Ross King and spending a week in Florence. So you could email me and I'll be happy to meet you. You've been a wonderful customer for so long. It'll be sort of interesting to see. Do you have circles way down here from your ridiculous night hours watching our programs?
it doesn't cast a reflection in the mirror, I think.
That'd be very nice, Stefania. It would be great.
Let's see here. I think that's
That it?
about it. Well, there is one question. Andrew, have you sold the film rights yet?
No, I have not sold the film rights yet. I will say that my agent is shopping it around, but no, I've not sold the film rights yet.
It's an natural for Hollywood. It
Oh,
really
absolutely.
is. Yeah.
100%.
But I'm holding true to my first statement. Nothing ever gets made until I can actually see it made.
That's
I
right.
won't believe it.
No, you're so right. I mean, the road to Hollywood is it's worse than the Roman ruins or the,
It's paved in tears.
whatever it is, the road in Japan that I once tried to walk where the paving stones are so terrible that, or the Great Wall of China. You'd think you got up on top of the Great Wall of China and you could just walk. Forget it. It's, these mountainous stones and all you have to it's like climbing something or other. And, we forget about stuff like that. Anyway, it's been a real pleasure. JT, don't go away because I need to talk to you for a minute. Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And Patrick, I'll end the meeting if that's okay with you. We do have autographed copies of Splinter Effect, and I'm telling you, it's a wonderful read. So much fun. Great present to give to somebody. We already mentioned the fact that you could read it yourself and give it away, or you could just give it away. Right? So we'll hope to see Andrew here next March.
Thank you. I'd be delighted.
All right, that'd be great. Bye, everybody.
Somebody's looking for something to read. Hint, hint,
Yes, I love it.
hint.
Bye,
See ya.
Patrick. Bye, Andrew. Right, don't
Bye.
kill the meeting, Patrick.
Okay. Let me just get us off here.
Yeah, just there we go. I need to talk to JT about scheduling.
Yeah, no worries. I think